I'm Catherine Merlo. I'm currently working as a sustainability strategy consultant at a Danish architecture firm, a small business. Prior to that, I lived and worked in Seattle, Washington for 8 years, where I worked in the American opera industry. I did social impact philanthropy at Seattle Opera, and I have a CFRE, Certified Fundraising Executive credential. I moved to Denmark with my family 18 months ago, and as a part of my transition, I completed the MBA, full-time MBA program at Copenhagen Business School. So for me, an MBA had always been a part of my larger career plan. I relocated with my family. My partner works for a big Danish company, Novo Nordisk. And so for me as a nonprofit executive, it was very difficult in the Danish market to do a one-for-one transition. So I took that as an opportunity to really pursue this dream of rounding out my business knowledge, understanding different parts of the organization from different perspectives, and also coming from philanthropy into a market where individual private giving was not really a part of the business models of typical nonprofits. I saw this as an opportunity to kind of transition my understanding of sustainability from this sort of social impact focused nonprofit environment into something that was more holistically environmental, social, and governance corporate sustainability. For me personally, right, sustainability is a leadership challenge. And it requires people to really think about the impacts and the harm that is done from the status quo. So every step is a harm reduction and a harm mitigation step. And at the same time, you also, not everyone is in a position to say, right, like I at my company, for example, right, like I cannot say, we're going to only accept jobs for timber construction from 2023 on. Like that's not in my scope, right? But what I can do is work with people who feel, because of where they are in their career arc, especially I think younger people who come with this expectation and this fire that change has to happen now, that sense of urgency that is so important and so needed in diverse teams. But you know, everyone deserves every day to wake up and go to a company and go to work and feel like they are contributing towards a sustainable future, and to trust that their leadership is working at addressing the complexity of this transition within their business case. And I mean, I would have never been able to have the kinds of leadership coaching courses, I mean, without an MBA. I mean, HR is so essential in how you lead sustainably. And if I was in, or if I had done more of a like a climate change kind of focused sustainability masters, I wouldn't have been exposed to the way that sustainable leadership intersects with different functions within an organization. So I work at a Danish architecture firm, Dissing+Wietling. We are a 50-year-old company that was founded based off of Arne Jacobsen, the celebrated Danish designer's studio. And we do bridge design, so mobility architecture. We do heritage and transformation projects in the Danish market, and we do new construction. And construction as an industry, I mean, they make up 50% of raw material extraction in Europe, 35% of waste, anywhere from 5 to 11% of national emissions in the EU. So it is a huge problem. And for our company, this idea, this Nordic tradition of resource minimalism, elegance, simplicity, focusing on daylight and thermal comfort has been a through line of our entire design practice for the whole 51 years that we've existed. And thinking in terms of the market for sustainability has not been a strong suit. So how do you organize in a way that responds to the current market, but also honors this tradition, this brand, this way of designing, And that has really been my challenge. So I was born and raised in an architecture firm. My family's firm didn't survive the financial crisis, but my first professional role was digitalizing 40 years of drawings, like in 2003. So I have the unique perspective of having worked on a typewriter, but also digitalizing in like the early 2000s. So for me, I think I was really attracted to this challenge because it reminds me of what that process was like, of how do you make this seismic change in your work processes. And also, I think for me, it made a lot of sense to have my first professional role in Denmark be in a kind of organization with the kind of value system that was so close to how I was raised. It was like my foundation could be the same, whether I was in the US or in Denmark. And what I think is really, really intriguing about Dissing+Wietling is that it is a very international firm. However, it works in an incredibly Danish cultural tradition. So how do you balance that? There are like over 8 languages that people in our company speak, but Danish is the corporate language. The youngest member of our team is 25. The oldest member of our team is 85. And there's only 49 people. So how do you manage that diversity? How do you stay true to these very Danish design traditions? What are the cultural norms that are reinforced? And then how, in the context of this sustainability challenge, how do you leverage all of that diversity in order to get people really inspired and hopeful about the future? Very, actually. So, I mean, I decided, I flirted with the idea. Of course, there are 4 concentrations at Copenhagen Business School, and I flirted a little bit with digitalization because we had a really awesome professor, and that was our first course, and also the same for finance. But I think I knew in my heart that I wanted to go all in on impact. And I had already signed my internship contract before I had registered for my concentration. So a lot of my conversations with the company and about their needs and about the scope of the consulting work I would do for them, I mean, I knew in the back of my mind that the courses that were a part of the concentration would be much more helpful. And so I think while maybe the timeline didn't work, when I look back in retrospect, I know 100% that I converted my internship into an offer, in part because of the learnings from the concentration, which of course happen while you're doing your internship. Yeah, so the governance and sustainability concentration this year had the smallest percentage of classmates do it in my cohort. But of course, we were the COVID appliers. So we all applied to business school during lockdown, and then we're the first class that had kind of this quasi-normal year. So we were very small, only 31. So out of the 5 of us, I guess I am the only one that is currently not traveling. This is a bit of an interesting question. However, I would say that the thing about the Copenhagen Business School MBA is that you can do a different concentration and you're not going to be very far from sustainability. Sure, you're not taking a sustainable operations or sustainable finance course, but that philosophical orientation really underpins the digitalization course and really also underpins the entrepreneurship course. And so I have classmates that are now at Novo Nordisk working in digitalization, and absolutely it is a part of their work to integrate the digital strategy with the, what do they call it? Zero environmental impact. And that's also the same at Maersk. I have 2 colleagues that are at Maersk working in marketing. They both did digitalization and they are both working with sustainability. So I think also the fact that there's this through line, right? We have a managing sustainable corporations course that is sort of the heart of the core curriculum. And because of that, and also the work that Andreas Rasha, our dean, has done with the faculty in developing the actual course curriculum throughout the year, you don't really go through HR, innovation, marketing, finance without also talking about the intersection with sustainability group function. And so because, I mean, for me, right, I am a sustainability functional specialist. So my concentration really mattered in me taking on my role. But I would say that my classmates who are now working in big Danish companies have this skill set that allows them to be change leaders within their organization and kind of break down that silo between sustainability and CSR group function and where they're working. So, I mean, Denmark is a small country, but they absolutely lead when it comes to sustainability and sustainable innovation, the energy transition. As a part of my internship strategy project, I did a lot of stakeholder interviews with people at the Danish Association of Architecture Firms, Danish Green Building Council, and something that kept coming back to me was this point that Denmark is so market ready that it is the perfect playground. And for me, that was really what was most attractive about the CBS MBA, because I knew that the business environment was so ready to talk about these really necessary and hard things about decarbonization. I would also say that culturally, this idea that you can collaborate across organizational types is also really intriguing. We did a lot of work in our year with guest speakers from the Maersk McKinney Moller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping, which is an interesting partnership organization. It's a nonprofit, but it was originally funded by Maersk, and they partner with ports, municipal governments, shipping firms, to really think about how you decarbonize an entire industry. And I think that kind of systems thinking is a really unique part of working and studying in Copenhagen. Really think about the parts of your background and how they align with sustainability. I think you would be really surprised at how many of the things that you have done actually are sustainability job functions. I think there's this tendency to maybe think of, oh, it's new, it's different, it's completely separate from anything that I've ever done. And that's really not true. We're all a part of this transition together, right? This green transition, this just transition. And it is something that is being developed, right? Like people first developed financial statements hundreds of years ago. People first wrote their sustainability reports like 30 years ago. So you think about that, right? Like how much change has happened even just over my lifetime in this space. And it's fast and rapidly evolving. And so to be a part of that, transition, and to move your career into this space that thinks about this integrated problem of how do you impact the planet, how do you impact people, and how do you continue to flourish economically, I think you would be really surprised. So when you are looking at your profile, when you are going through your application checklist, when you are even just looking at your resume, right? Really think about how what you do impacts those outcomes, and you'll be really surprised and I think inspired to continue that career shift. So that depends on your definition of sustainability, and that depends on your orientation in the market. So my personal perspective, right, is that if you work in sort of this Anglo-American, it also exists in the Netherlands and Canada, this sort of nonprofit fundraising, nonprofit management world, right? Your philanthropy is social impact driven, and fundraisers and fundraising leaders are absolutely driving the sustainability agenda. I would say that that is very different from some places, including Denmark and the European market, where when you think of sustainability, you think of corporate sustainability, you think of sustainability reporting, GRI standards, you think of governance initiatives, and sustainable finance. And I think for me, it was really important that I found an MBA that saw saw sustainability completely holistically through all parts of the organization, and also valued equally environmental and social impact and value creation. I knew coming to Denmark, coming from an American nonprofit fundraising background, that I was like not going to meet people that had that background, and also that I was not going to be in a class where anyone else really had that experience and understanding. And so I think I spent the first few months really kind of hard on myself, saying I didn't work in sustainability before, even though I had. I was working with people, I was having conversations about the social impact of wealth and wealth inequity in the US. I was working in DEIA. I was working with an opera company, right? This traditional old organization that has traditionally excluded large communities of people, and working on our strategy to how you change that. What are the structural barriers to being an organization that connects the arts to all citizens in a community? And also, what are the governance considerations of that, right? What has to change in your governance structure to actually be an inclusive organization? And now that I think about it, so many of those conversations around governance, finance, private wealth, those are so aligned with the sustainability agenda. And I think, also maybe my message to people who have worked in nonprofits, but maybe not human rights organizations, right? And maybe not directly climate or environmental organizations, the work you do, the actual skills that you are doing and developing, those are the skills that you do as a sustainability functional role. So even if the context is different, the actual work is the same, and you can translate that. Yeah, I think stakeholder management, this idea of co-creation, like how do we co-create standards in a way that feels good for everyone and brings people along on a journey? I think a lot of sustainability, especially in small organizations, is change management. So how also do you sit in these really uncomfortable conversations and also still challenge, like, why do something differently, right? So much of what we hope from the green transition or transitioning to a circular economy or a just transition is this idea that it won't be the same, and change is hard for humans. It's like a behaviorally difficult thing to go through. And so I think if you have experience in kind of managing this change process and managing your stakeholders and bringing them along authentically, that is a really valuable area of expertise. I think you really need to know the market, right? Especially if you are an applicant that is coming maybe from North America, really understand that Europe is not a monolith. And so doing an MBA in a European capital, I was considering between 3 business schools in 3 different capitals in 3 different parts of Europe. And really, truly, the market itself, the business climate it's not one for one. And so I think when you get your offers, don't just look at the schools, also look at the market environment, and also look at not just quality of life, right? But also sort of what's the networking style? Like it worked out great for me that Copenhagen is a place of coffee chats, but not, and LinkedIn in Denmark is like everyone's on it and it is the place to be at all times. But that's not true everywhere, right? And if you are maybe anxious about social media, think about the level of networking that has to happen on LinkedIn.